97 days to the elections, and we, of course, are your election headquarters. We have to bring you up to speed as a show, that is the AM show, on all that has been happening around us related to this election, 2020 in December. We will bring you what the final head will be and the decision point from voters across the country. But as we've been doing a week or two from now, we've been looking at what your own concerns based on a question we straight away just posed to you as citizenry. And today's question is very simple. Will infrastructure inform your decision to vote? And that's what we're bringing to you on Voters' Voice.
You know, if you are studying and you don't have that maximum strength, going up and down, sometimes you get home, the child gets home and so tired that he can't even go back in revising the notes he's been given or doing his assignments and those things. But if the person is resident on campus, there is room for him to sleep. They're just on campus, so there's nothing like long distance traveling or something like that. It will help the child. It will reserve some energy for the child to use in revising his notes and also going back to doing his assignment. And when it comes to the health aspect, you know, when there are no hospitals, there are no infrastructure. There might be some available, but not too enough. Now we've heard of a lot of patients going to the hospital and not getting beds and not getting space even to put the beds if there are. And people have really passed on because of this issue, not getting a place to sleep for the doctor to have proper attention of taking care of them. So if there is this government or there is this person in power who is giving us this infrastructure you see, life is more important than anything. So if lives are being saved because of infrastructure and someone is in to provide and is doing it, it will really inform my decision in bringing the person on again to carry on in doing those things. And it's very, 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 very important to have infrastructure because it helps in saving lives. So as you ask, it will be one of the major things I will look at in voting.
Well, it will be a factor because when we talk about development, we cannot sideline infrastructure. So if we are making assessment on the government in terms of what he has been able to do to inform us in making a decision, we can't suddenly December. Infrastructure will be a key.
Adoba mama toni de. Abambia ba. Oya kwan osisi school dan. Osisi school dan. Oya dan road na de. Inti. Ame mum abambia ba motor man. Because of phobia need more about baby motor man.
Infrastructure near one. Because on na shema improve to Juma, a Juma so yeah the Ebakuru. There's a factory, now see a school down near there, about Buama, and Juma the Abakuru.
When I look at the infrastructure about the schools, and that was the first thing I'm just looking for, the education and the security forces. They are doing so very well.
And these are views from normal residents from Takoradi, the Western Regional Capital. But it's where we bring in contributor and also main person to speak to on this. Dr. Seidu is a senior lecturer at the Political Science Department at the University of Ghana. Joining us. Good morning to you, Dr. Seidu.
Good morning, Mr. Walker.
Now, you've had those responses. How would you describe those responses from ordinary voters?
I think the ordinary voter is actually looking at issues and policies that can directly impact their lives. Infrastructural development indirectly affect the life of the ordinary citizen. And that is why, depending on the level of development of your democracy, technically speaking, what I have been able to put up and what I am going to put up in terms of infrastructure may not even be a major campaign issue. If you go to the US, Britain, North America, and largely Europe, the voters look at specific policies that has been formulated and implemented, and that has a direct impact on the lives of the ordinary citizen. Infrastructure indirectly does that. So I think we should expand the debate on infrastructure to just move beyond how many number of infrastructure within which specific area I have been able to put up, and directly weigh on the impact of those infrastructure on the lives of the ordinary human being. For example, if you build a road, if I do not have a car, how do I use that road? If you build a hospital and I'm not sick, or even and I'm sick and I go to the hospital and I can't afford healthcare, how do I assess it? If you build school and I do not have money, how do I pay school fees and attend school? If all these things have what? An element of indirect impact on the life of the ordinary voter. So it is no longer about how many infrastructure I've been able to put up, but to what extent has that infrastructure affected my life as an ordinary citizen? That's the first thing we have to look at, the impact. Two, we also have to expand the whole debate of the infrastructure to look at the cost. How much money has been spent to put up that infrastructure? And has there been cost-benefit analysis? Has there been value for money? Or in most cases, the ordinary Ghanaian has always been cheated in the cost of what? Procuring or prosecuting the infrastructure development. And the third component we need to expand this debate to include is the level of maintenance. To what extent is it relevant if you put up an infrastructure or a building and then you do not take it because it belongs to the state, you do not take the necessary measure to maintain it over the years? If you go to the developed world, and even when Britain was the height of the dominant power in the global world, most of the infrastructure that was put up at that particular place are still legacy projects. Some of them, the outside may look very terrible or not that attractive. But if you go inside the building and you see the level of maintenance culture that is being exhibited, you marvel. And that saves the citizens a lot of money, because if you are able to maintain it very well, you do not have to spend so much time putting up the same infrastructure again elsewhere when the old one is not properly maintained. So first of all, I think the sentiments being expressed by the ordinary voter is actually geared towards policies and programs and promises that directly impact their lives. And that is the whole concept of development. If you read the works of Professor Amartya Sen, he talks about development. No, it's not about just uplifting the ordinary life of the ordinary people, but development is also about what? Expanding the various freedoms and choice of the ordinary human being to make life decisions. So if you are able to put in a lot of measures in place, I will now decide which one of them is better for me, other than just saying that you people, you need wood. When you build wood, then you'll be able to expand your businesses. What about if wood is not what I need? So the first thing about the focus of development is the ordinary human being and expanding his life choices and freedom. And the whole concept about democracy is about enhancing the ordinary lifestyle of the human being and the citizen, and making him and affording him the ability to participate in life decision-making processes that directly or indirectly impact his ordinary living lifestyles. So it's all about the people. And infrastructure indirectly impact on the life of the people. So moving forward, we need to expand that debate just beyond how many numbers have been able to put up within what number of period or time. But how does that impact on the life of the ordinary citizen? That's the key question.
Now, when you look at the Human Development Report, indeed, the latest as they have it as published, we historically have made enormous progress from the 90s till now, and I'm talking about the 90s because that's when, from 1992, we say we wanted to democratize and so consolidate what we're practicing currently. Now, for the voters, are they able to see through, have a proper observation, and so assess what sort of infrastructural development that are promised them, and so that become the decision point for which they decide to vote?
I think infrastructure is one of the things that the voter can easily identify and assess when they are promised by politicians. And that is why it is one of the most easiest projects or policies in manifesto that if citizens really want to seek accountability, they can easily do. Because these are visible, one, and you can also access them, go into them, look at them from the outside, and be able to tell the level of quality of engineering that went into it. And based on that, as an ordinary citizen, you can actually tell whether what has been put out there amounts, that's value for money terms, the kind of budget that has gone into it. One thing about infrastructure is also that it kind of provides legacy. They are legacy projects. And most politicians want their names to be associated to that kind of legacy projects. So, for example, if you drive past the Kwame Nkrumah Circle, you forever remember His Excellency John Dramani Mahama for putting it up. If you have ever used the Tema Highway, you will forever remember Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. You see, if you have ever accessed electricity to the Akosombo Dam. So these are kind of legacy projects. Politicians usually like it for two reasons. One, because it gives them the opportunity to leave a lasting impression on the lives of the voters. One, and two, they can easily identify their performances to those particular infrastructure because they are visible and people can see them. One disadvantage strongly with this kind of things is that most politicians are able to take advantage of the procurement process and benefit on the sidelines, putting up these things. Sometimes they inflate the cost of the projects to be able to make a lot of money. So if it is something that is visible, something that people can easily relate with, something that people can easily identify, then it stands to reason that politicians will always want to do that thing. And when it is an election year, they will quickly cite them as promises that they have been able to achieve. The good aspect of it is also that citizens can also visit these things, look at them, and be able to decide whether what has been promised is done, but also done to the standard of quality that is beneficial to the people. I'll give you one example, Roland. Recently, when the vice president did the manifesto thing that the MPP has been able to complete and accomplish, the MPP's track record in terms of manifesto, you see that citizens were able to quickly use the tracker and go to the kind of project size that were said to have been executed. And they were able to quickly tell whether this was actually done or not done, or the level of completion rate, but also the quality of work that went into it. So infrastructure is good because people can use it to readily assess the performance of a government. But it also has a side step. The other thing has to do with the fact that if you put those infrastructures up, how does it directly benefit the people? I still want us to look at it beyond just the numbers, but also see the quality, level of maintenance, but also what the impact on the lives of the people. So it is a good thing. People can assess it. People can use it to vindicate your promises. And then politicians can easily point to you and say that I've done so much within this number of years or time period.
In the developed world, building an interchange or an overhead or a highway definitely is not going to give Trump a lot of votes because they have saturated projects or infrastructural actions that have been taken there. But we also do know that social media has made the world closer. So they look at YouTube elsewhere and they see what is out there and they would want it same in their country. But if you look at what we need, how do voters then make the determination that a promise of infrastructure, which is seen, and then a promise of a welfare package or policy, which is transient or not seen, either are related, are equal, or one is above the other when they want to make the decision to vote?
So in this instance, I think I'm assuming that voters will largely look for policies that they feel, policies that impact their lives, even if it is physically not visible. So let's pick the free senior high policy of this government. Free senior high is not an institution. It's not like a structure that you can see. but people are able to feel the impact of that policies on their lives, especially parents that have their kids going to public schools and they are not paying school fees, can realize the direct impact of that policy on their lives. But free senior high is not an infrastructure. If you are looking at this whole concept of hot meals that was given to people, or the kind of social intervention program that this government put up during the COVID era to help people who have lost their jobs and businesses that are struggling. To those businesses and individuals who are receiving this package, it directly impacts on their lives. But you will not see it in terms of visible infrastructural terms. People are able to access. Even if you go back to history, people have always talked about the Achampong era, even though it was a military regime, by virtue of the fact that they implemented policies that directly led to the development of this country, including Operation Feed Yourself and Operation Feed Your Industries. The Operation Feed Yourself initiative actually brought everybody back to the whole concept of traditional agriculture. People were planting, people were growing, people became agriculturalists, food became abundant, and people were able to make money. So I learned during holidays, university students would go to the farm, cultivate, harvest, and get money, and come back and pay their school fees. So it is not an infrastructure. But even when we still study politics in Ghana, we still make references to those twin pioneering policies of that particular regime. It's just like saying planting for food and jobs. This is also not an infrastructure, but it is a kind of policy that creates an impact on the life of the people. So it is not just about having a visible developmental project that you can reference in talking about your achievements, but it is about putting up policies, formulating policies that directly can impact on the life of the individual and give him that life choices that is needed in development to be able to aspire to greater heights. I'm not by this saying infrastructure development is not important. It is, but it kind of directly impact. We are looking at, in these circumstances, if you ask me to vote in December, infrastructure development will not affect so much of my vote because it indirectly impacts my life. I'm looking at something that directly have an impact on my life as an individual. And if that existed, I'll look at the political party that actually implemented it. If it doesn't exist, I'll carefully scrutinize the manifestos of all the political parties and see which one of them realistically can meet the needs that I have that can directly impact my life. And that will be one of the serious determining factor. Infrastructure is good, but it has a kind of limit, because it is kind of a facilitator. It facilitates that direct impact on the life of the people that we are talking about. When there are actually other policies that can directly impact on the life of the citizen. But political parties, in terms of priority, I think both must be considered, because if you go to some specific regions in this country, they are in dire need of some level of infrastructure development to be able to upgrade their lives. If you go to those particular areas, those things are very key. If you go to some other areas, infrastructure of that kind may not necessarily impact their lives. So we have to disaggregate the voter preferences to the level of social status and social equality, so that based on that, we will know what to do when we go where. But we shouldn't use a one size fits all policy wherever we go. Disaggregated needs is the best way to actually ascertain what the people need at what particular point in time and where, so that you do not go and do things that will never lead to them voting for you, if indeed that's not what they needed.
Professor Joseph Stiglitz, he is said to be somebody who is a proponent of development economics, and that's what he does. And when he was marking 50 years of his teaching in 2015, the World Economic Forum of the World Bank decided to have a whole lecture or a whole forum for him. And one of the impact they said he's made, indeed across all the publications he's made, is that the focus of countries on macroeconomic indicators to spur their development should not be the way the development of the world should go. Rather, governments in developing countries need to focus on issues that affect people and not drive their citizens crazy on variables like GDP, indicators like employment rates, when it doesn't impact directly in relation to how much is spent to create jobs, for example, and develop their countries. Well, my assumption is that he's saying we shouldn't be using the macroeconomic variables to be the indicators for development. If that is the case, what should be the paradigm shift of our government in Africa or Ghana that resonates with the needs of the people in relation to our discussion we're having now?
Thank you, Mr. Walker. If you go back to the early 1990s, the whole discourse of development actually shifted from the early 1990s, from the state-centric approach or the use of econometric and GDP growth to measure development, from looking at the human development. Now, development in the economy, building a solid economy, is a means to an end in development discourse. The end in every development is the people. Having a solid economy can actually enhance your propensity to provide for the needs of the people. So economic growth is actually a means to an end in the discourse of development and not an end in itself. So if you go back to the early 90s, I think 1994, when the first World Development Report was written, you are looking at the works of Amartya Sen, Mahmoud Al-Haq, Martha Nussbaum, and all those scholars. They propose that development is not just to what extent your economic grows, but how do you translate that economic growth to broadly enhancing the welfare, the well-being, and then the general living condition of your people. And I believe since then, instead of just using GDP growth, GMP growth, countries are now using the Human Development Index that looks at the level of health, education, social amenities, infrastructure, and all those things. They now count. Even now, we have what we call the happiness index, where people even look at the level at which citizens in the country are happy every day. And that leads to measuring the level of development that exists in that particular country. So when you juxtapose this shift in the discourse of academia vis-a-vis development to what our politicians do now, it's telling us that we need to actually refocus and recalibrate what we promise and what we do as governments. Development should be holistically geared towards enhancing the welfare and the well-being of the individual. Whatever thing that helps us to achieve that, including economic growth, including infrastructure and all those things, are rather means and not an end in themselves. So when we are formulating our manifesto and policies, we should always focus on the individual and what the individual may need at what particular point in time. Development strategy doesn't come in a kind of one-size-fits-all policy. Every state, depending on the level of development and economic might, may have disaggregated development needs. So the fact that country A is doing A, B, C, D doesn't mean that country B should also do the same. Development is local and development is needs-based. So political parties should look at their local environment and do a kind of needs assessment of the people. And the needs assessment and disaggregated needs of the people should rather be what drives the manifesto that they put together. And that should rather be what they implement when they come to government. So honestly speaking, we need a little bit of recalibration in terms of what features predominantly in our manifestos and what we do when we come to government. And the priority must always be the citizen. Every development revolves around the citizen. Every development is local. And so should political parties focus when they are preparing their manifesto. There may be other variables that may affect the quality of manifesto that is being prosecuted by political parties when they come to government. But largely, the focus should be on the people. And Mr. Walker, it's not just even the concept of development, even the concept of security. In the academic literature, the concept of security has shifted largely from purely focusing on state-centric or what we call Westphalian security to actually looking at human security. So everything, whether at the level of development, at the level of security, at the level of, is geared towards enhancing the welfare and the well-being of the human being. So whatever policies that we formulate as political parties, the human being must be the focus, and how we are able to make the human being prosper, progress, and then to feel worth living, the life that they are being given to live by their politicians and leaders.
In Africa, we have a whole market, 1.2 billion, 1.3 billion, and still growing. The good thing about the population in Africa, especially sub-Saharan, is the fact that we're still in the bracket of being young, very agile, a working population. So it means that we need the right sort of tools, the right sort of education to make impact. What Corona has taught us is that, well, the degrees and the formal education is good, but if you are into the provision of services, manufacturing, you do things with your hands, it enables you to improve your standards of living. What should be the main focus in relation to infrastructure and the policy interventions from these parties to meet that objective for the voters or their population? And we're talking Ghana.
Yeah, I largely think what government should do is to take decisions that generally enhances the skills and develop our human capacity base as a state. If you look at the history of development, countries that have largely succeeded actually formulated and implemented strategic policies at the infant stages of their development. Ghana is described as a middle income country, but still, if you look at the level of infrastructural growth, but also the level of clout that we have at the international level, it's still far away from similar development and clout other countries at this same level of developmental achievement are able to make. I think we are becoming too reliant on our natural resources to the detriment of enhancing and upgrading our human resource. I think the human resource is very key in either discovering, utilizing these natural resources that we have. And the natural resources are very key in actually projecting our developmental levels from where we are to where we want to be. So it's just like if you are a country and you keep developing your human resource to the level that most of the contracts you have given to foreign companies to come and work on simply because you have a human resource gap, you are able to meet that particular challenge. And then most of these developmental projects are given back to your people. The state tax these citizens and they reinvest the money back into the economy. So it is a kind of a twin policy approach where you actually develop the you actually harvest the natural resources that we have in a more environmental friendly and beneficial way. But at the same time, you also develop and build your human skills and human capacity to be able to meet the gap that might have stand your way in your quest to exploit and develop your natural resources. You look at great countries, maybe for example like Japan, which is actually the third largest economy. They do not have the kind of natural resources that we do in Ghana, but they have been able to actually invest largely in their human resource, and they are doing very well. If you go to a country maybe like India, they do not have the kind of natural resources that we have in Africa, but they have been able to choose a special aspect of development, IT, and they have built huge human capacity within that area. And when you go to almost everywhere, they export IT technicians to be able to get the needed revenue, just as we export gold and then cocoa. You go to maybe a country like Cuba. Cuba may not have all the natural resources that we have, but they have been able to develop their health system. And Cuba exports doctors to almost a lot of countries across the globe. So it is not just focusing on developing infrastructure. It's not just focusing on continuous exploiting our natural resources, and really in some cases we even use it as a collateral to get loans and all. This is not how development should be. It is also beyond looking at the natural resources that we have, beyond looking at the infrastructure that we can put up. We should also invest hugely in our human resource. A lot of the youth population that we have in this country are all looking for white-collar jobs, government provided jobs. If we were able to, our educational standards, if our educational standards were able to give them the needed skills, especially from largely support from government, the private sector, and then the industry, these people will finish school and they'll be able to start something on their own and then go on to employ people. The level of unemployment will have reduced because we are empowering our people to build their own future, but also to employ people who would have ordinarily been waiting for government to employ them.
Yeah.
So if you are able to build these kind of skills and then invest in human development, we are indirectly creating job opportunities because those individuals will be able to employ them, create jobs, and employ other people. And that will have reduced the burden on government. So we should not always focus on government must do this, government must do that. Once we are able to invest profitably in certain sectors, and you also mentioned the fact that most of them work with their hands. You see, the whole concept of modernization and modernization theory speaks to the fact that we should gradually introduce mechanized ways of doing things in our day-to-day lives. It's just like if somebody is going to farm his land with a cutlass or a hoe, and somebody is going to use a tractor to cultivate. You see that the level of output and then achievement will not be the same. So we should find a way to train people in these particular skills and to empower them with the resources that they need to be able to create. And I bet you most youth don't even want to work for the government. If they had the opportunity, the capital and the skills, they would have created jobs themselves, employed themselves, and employ others. And we have to pay so much attention to investments in those sectors as well.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Dr. Ali Seidu, Senior Lecturer, Political Science Department, University of Ghana, helping us. Great contribution so far on our election segment, Voters' Voice.